Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook for today, July 26, 2024. We're going over potential signals to watch in the Atlantic as we close out the month of July, heading into early August. Some of the models are picking up on potential development in the Western Atlantic. Makes sense since we are now starting to head into the peak of the hurricane season. We're going to go over that, and obviously what is going on right now across the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific, since there is a tropical storm out there right now. But overall, in the current time, there is not much happening, at least in terms of the National Hurricane Center. If you look on the tropical weather bulletin, over the next 7 days, the Atlantic remains quiet. National Hurricane Center not seeing anything in the near future. But as I mentioned, there are some signals beginning to pop up as we head into the end of the month and we start heading into the beginning of next month in the Atlantic. In the Eastern Pacific, on the other hand, there is activity right now. We have Tropical Storm Bud, but this is not going to last much longer. Bud is already on its way out of here. It was one quick spin up, as we like to say. Very much something we see a lot in the Atlantic, and we also get as well in the Eastern Pacific, but that's what Tropical Storm Bud was. Pretty quickly intensified a little bit, kind of caught everybody off guard. Became 60 miles per hour yesterday. Now it's back down to 40 miles per hour. Minimum central pressure of 1,007 millibars. And I'll show you a satellite image of this in a moment. This is all on its way out. It's going to stay well offshore from any sort of coastline, and Bud will not be of any concern for anybody in terms of a threat to land. And if we take a look at the National Hurricane Center cone, you could even see it as well. It's going to stay well offshore of any sort of land. It's going to die out probably within the next few hours. As I said, it's already on its way out, and it'll probably not even be something to talk about of any sort of noteworthiness at all come this time tomorrow. And really quickly, just to show you that, here's a satellite image of Bud, and you can see it is basically already a hollow core. There's all that is left is the skeleton of the system, and obviously that is the low level center that you can see spinning in the frame. There's no much of any convection left. I think whatever convection is there is probably sheared, and the environment is dried anyways. The bottom line, it is a quick tropical storm to add on to the Eastern Pacific statistics of what has been a very slow season for them so far, and it is not much more than that. So nothing much else to really say about Bud, although there is, really quickly before I move on, there is an area of interest as well. In the Eastern Pacific, this is a 20% chance in the next 7 days, and this will be something that we need to watch in the Pacific over the next several days, because things could actually begin to pick up a little bit after 2.5 months of being as dormant as the Eastern Pacific possibly could be. It looks like things might actually finally become a little bit more active, and we might get 2 or 3 more named storms over the next 2 weeks in the least, as we do have more favorable conditions that'll move into the Eastern Pacific, and eventually, I'll show you towards the end of the video, those favorable conditions will move into the Atlantic as we head towards the middle to even latter portions of next month, and that'll set up for things to be very interesting as we head into the peak of the hurricane season. That's just a snippet, though, of what we're going to talk about in a little bit. Here's a satellite image, though, of the Atlantic right now. You can see it is obviously quiet. We have fronts here extending off the east coast. Seems like there's an upper level low near the Bahamas or some sort of upper level system. Obviously, you can see that there is shear associated with that too. So in general, the Atlantic is quiet right now. Also, lots of dry air coming off the continent of Africa. Very typical for this time of year. Still in the early season months. We're still into July. We're heading into August, though, and a bunch of the Saharan air that we have in the Atlantic right now will begin to die down as we head over towards the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we'll probably start seeing activity begin to uptick as we get towards the peak of the hurricane season. You can see, though, that there is a tropical wave. That's what all of this very vigorous convection is embedded, I think, within the ITCZ, but there's a tropical wave in here, and this is actually causing for potential interest as we head towards the Western Atlantic over the next week or so. Some of the models are beginning to pick up that we might need to watch the Western Atlantic for potential development, and I think it is this tropical wave right here that is the culprit of it. You can see the 850 millibar vorticity. Obviously not much happening in the Atlantic. Really quickly, you could actually see the signal reflection in the 850 millibar vorticity of Bud way out to the left. That is Bud right there, and it obviously has a solid low-level center, but it's obviously on its way out. And once again, it is far away from any sort of land in the Eastern Pacific. In the Atlantic, on the other hand, you can see the reflection of this tropical wave too. It's a very broad wave, and that's why I think there's some uncertainty with the models with whether or not this will really be something to watch over the next several days. But the European is picking up on it, and I'm actually going to show you the GFS right now. I think they're starting to show hints of this tropical wave, at least once it starts getting around the Western Atlantic region over the next several days. And let's actually take a look at that on the GFS model. Nothing much happening over the next few days. I guess you could see some energy, probably some sort of tropical wave in there that moves westward, approaches the islands as we head towards the next week or so. And then you could see this as we get towards the end of the next week. So this is this time next week, hour 168. You can start to see that there is some sort of reflection of a tropical wave on the GFS. It stays kind of sandwiched near all of this landmass in the Northern Caribbean, and then as we head further out past a week, so this is really the not so reliable time frame, you can see that energy does try to consolidate some, and we're now nearing the next 9 to 10 days on the GFS. Looks like there is some sort of energy in the Bay of Campeche, and it does seem like it does come from whatever tropical wave. Let's really quickly look at that again. And yeah, it does seem like it does come from whatever tropical wave is out there in the central Atlantic right now. That is the GFS, though. They kind of show more or less of a broad sort of loose signal with this system. The European actually, we got to take this to the 0Z European because that's the one that's actually loaded up till the next week. The European, on the other hand, has been a lot more aggressive with this storm. This sort of system, and you could actually see it as we get towards around the next 4 to 5 days. This actually starts to consolidate some. It's not really solid yet, but especially as this head towards the Western Atlantic, you can see right there in the general Bahamas and into the Gulf, it looks like some sort of energy does consolidate some, and we do see that looks like a pretty solid tropical system, or at least some sort of development of some sort on the European as we head towards the next week to 10 days, and that does make its way into the Gulf. On the 0Z run, on the last several runs, they all had it kind of happening in the Bahamas and more of something off the southeast coast. Looks like this run they show it, the 0Z run for today shows it into the Gulf, but in general, the European, one of the major global models we're watching, you could see definitely some sort of development occurs within that region as we head into the first few days of the month next month. So that is something that a lot of people are talking about, and I think it does fall pretty decently in line with upper level conditions we have right now. Taking a look at the velocity potential anomalies, and you could see right now in the current time frame there's some of these greens located over the Eastern Atlantic. This is probably a convectively coupled Kelvin wave right now that is in the Eastern Atlantic, and that's probably giving juice to the tropical wave that we have. That is the culprit of what the European and the GFS is hinting at. So we have that in its play, and that's going to move into Africa, and we'll probably see, as I assume, as we head towards the early part of next month, we'll probably see more signals after that. Because look, as we have this convectively coupled Kelvin wave come through, which is happening in the Atlantic right now, notice how we start to see a lot of this rising air really begin to develop over the Africa and Indian Ocean parts of the general world. And that correlates pretty well to not only stronger tropical waves, but generally conditions to become more favorable in the Atlantic. And on top of that, you can see on the velocity potential chart as we head further into next month, it actually seems like we're going to get an MJO passage of some sort to come from the Pacific, and this is what could actually stir up quite a bit of Pacific activity over the next several days to maybe the next week or so in the Eastern Pacific for a while. The GFS is certainly hinting at it if you actually go and look at it. And also, I think European ensembles are showing it too, but that is going to move through the Pacific. And then as we get towards the middle to the latter portion of next month, that is going to make its way into the Atlantic as well. And we know as we head towards the middle portion of next month, that is when the ramp up towards the peak of the hurricane season begins. It especially happens around August 20th. And you notice around that time frame, August 20th, is when this Kelvin wave or MJO of some sort seems to move through into the Atlantic and then back into the Africa, Indian Ocean region of the world. And that'll definitely prime things in the Atlantic for sure. And that'll be something that we watch as we head towards the middle to latter portions of next month, especially because we'll be moving into August. And definitely climatology-wise, things will start to get a lot more active. But as of right now, over the next week or so, this is actually out to the next 10 days on the European ensembles. Yeah, you could see it. Not only we have the European operational picking up on it, but the European ensembles as well. Out to the next 10 days, we actually have a lot of ensemble support, and they're generally spread out through some portions of either the Bahamas or the Gulf or the Southeast, whatever. It is generally in the Western Atlantic, and they do show that there is something in the cards potentially. And this is certainly a solid signal. So this will be something we watch as we head in towards towards the first few days of August. And then you can see in the Eastern Pacific as well, they have lots of activity. So the pieces are coming together. The signals are definitely there. And the bottom line, I think, is right now for us to watch, especially really quickly before I end it off with sea surface temperature anomalies in the Atlantic. They're obviously very, very warm this year. MDR continues to remain solidly in most areas at least a degree Celsius above normal, but especially in the Southeast and even the Eastern Gulf as well. Sea surface temperature anomalies are much above normal there. Lots of heat in the ocean for these waves to work with, and that'll definitely aid in anything that does try to develop. Plus the fact that we're getting into early August and things generally become more favorable in the Atlantic, this will definitely be a signal to watch. And it makes sense since we're getting into early August, and slowly from here on out, things will start to progressively become more active in the Atlantic, despite what a lot of people say, especially that we've been, not so active ever since we had Beryl. And honestly, thank goodness, because of how bad of a storm Beryl was. But the early season isn't typically that active anyways. And a lot of people are kind of catching on to that, saying, oh, we've not had any activity since Beryl. Is it really going to be suddenly not so active anymore? Not quite. The early season is not typically as active, but now, as we're getting in towards the peak of the season, the conditions will start to become more favorable, and now we're starting to see that manifest in signals like this, which we might need to watch as we head into early August. With that being said, not much else to go over, at least in terms of immediate tropical weather. Obviously, this will be something we'll be watching closely over the next week or so, and we'll see if this does actually seem like it'll be our next potential named storm in the Atlantic or not. Certainly a lot of things to change, and there's certainly lots of model uncertainty right now, which is why we're seeing potential signals right now, as opposed to could this actually be the storm that forms as our next storm into early August. So we gotta kind of be careful with how we put it right now, since it is still early on. It is still 7 to 10 days out, but the signals are there, and especially given that things will be this will be kind of coinciding with a more favorable atmosphere as we head into early August. It makes sense that we might need to watch this for potential development. With that being said, hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, I would appreciate it if you like, comment, subscribe, share your thoughts, and if you have any questions, post them in the comments as well, and I will definitely be happy to answer. Stay safe, peace, love, and kindness to all. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will talk again very soon.